Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant! Insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies win edition. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies got two big, encouraging wins over the weekend. Both of the victories were reminiscent of previous victories. First, on Friday night, the Grizzlies overwhelmed the Spurs in the second half for the second straight game to pick up two wins in San Antonio. And then the Grizzlies returned home for their Martin Luther King Day game, and they used a fourth quarter rally to take down the Timberwolves. For the second time in about 10 days, the Grizzlies erased a fourth quarter lead against Minnesota and got a final stop on an Anthony Edwards step back three-pointer. So on today's episode, I'm going to talk about both victories. I'm going to talk about the season debut of G.G. Jackson. Before I do, just a reminder for Grizzlies fans who are near me in the Middle Tennessee area that I will be hosting a watch party this Friday night, Friday, January 24th, 7 p.m. I'm going to be hosting a watch party over at Noble's Beer Hall. That's Noble's East. I will be giving away lots of Grizzlies prizes. Come hang out. Noble's Beer Hall this Friday night, January 24th, Grizzlies versus Pelicans. Also, a big thank you to Joseph Brown. He is the newest Grizzlies fan who signed up for my Patreon. Thank you, Joseph, for supporting my work. If you want to support the creation of this show and also get access to exclusive bonus content, I released a bonus episode on Friday. You can also join my Slack channel. You can do all of that, patreon.com/Fast Break Breakfast. All right, let's talk about the win over the Timberwolves first. It was a struggle of a game for a while. The Grizzlies did get off to a nice start briefly. They jumped out to a 16-5 lead just 5 minutes into the game, but then they really hit a lull. The Timberwolves outscored them 25-5 over the next 8.5 minutes. That run was ended on a cut for a layup by Desmond Bane, but throughout the first half, the Grizzlies kept struggling. They could not make three-pointers. They were only 4 for 22 on three-pointers in the first half. Jaren Jackson Jr. got in foul trouble. His minutes were limited, and at halftime, the Grizzlies had their lowest scoring first half of the season, only posted 43 points. They trailed 54-43. The third quarter showed signs of life, but the Grizzlies still really couldn't cut into the lead very well. Some of the highlights from that third quarter, you had the Ja Morant full court touchdown pass to Jalen Wells that made it a 10-point game. That play I thought was fun because the Timberwolves themselves had just spent a lot of time on the offensive end, missing shots, getting their own rebounds, keep trying to score, and then meanwhile, once the Grizzlies finally got the defensive board, they scored in just a couple of seconds. Also in that third quarter, you saw Jalen Wells making an impact on the game. He drew multiple offensive fouls. He frustrated Anthony Edwards. He caused the Timberwolves to burn their challenge on one of those offensive foul calls. This ended up being important, I think, later in the fourth quarter. During the final run where the Grizzlies took the lead, the Grizzlies had most of that run at the free throw line. And you can say it started with a Naz Reid foul on Jalen Wells on a three-pointer. The Grizzlies got a three-shot foul. They made all three free throws. I don't think it was a foul. I think Naz Reid blocked the ball first, and then any hand contact, I'm pretty sure, was inconsequential after the shot was blocked. But because of Jalen Wells getting under the skin of Anthony Edwards. Chris Finch had already used his challenge. The Timberwolves could not challenge at that point. So that was very, very important. Also, the big part of the rally in the fourth quarter, I think the storyline you got to talk about is Jaren Jackson Jr. Jaren Jackson Jr. scored 15 points in that fourth quarter. He scored in all manner of ways. He really took the game home for the Grizzlies. Also, credit Taylor Jenkins. If we're going to criticize Taylor Jenkins for playing time, I think we can give him his kudos when he actually plays Jaren Jackson Jr. a lot of minutes. After being limited in the first half in playing time because of foul trouble, because of picking up 3 early fouls, Jaren played 22 minutes in the second half. A Grizzlies player played the most minutes of anybody in the game in the second half. Jaren played all 12 fourth quarter minutes. Jaren definitely brought the game home with the scores off of the dribble, the scores going coast to coast. You had the post-ups where he turned right and finished to put the Grizzlies up. But actually, back it up a little bit, the Grizzlies took the lead for the first time in the second half on a Desmond Bane driving layup. That actually was the only part, I think that was the only part of their 11-0 run that was a made basket. 9 points from this 11-0 run were free throws. I think, as much as we don't like to say it, the Grizzlies got a generous whistle during this run. However, the generosity of the referees ended later on during the final sequence. I'm pretty sure the 2-minute report that comes out in several hours is going to say the referees missed Jaren Jackson Jr. getting fouled multiple times on the same possession. But doesn't matter. The Grizzlies get the victory. The Grizzlies outscored the Timberwolves 22-11 over the final 6 minutes of the game. After being held in check for the first 3 quarters as a team, the Grizzlies posted 37 points in the fourth quarter. You also got great playmaking moments from Ja Morant. Desmond Bane had another huge game. This was Desmond Bane's 5th straight 20-point performance. And then it all comes down to one final possession, which, like I said, was reminiscent of the last victory over the Timberwolves. The Grizzlies were up by 2. Timberwolves had the ball, but good defense. This time it wasn't Brandon Clark guarding Anthony Edwards. This time they forced a inbounds pass that went deep into the backcourt. That wasted some of the Timberwolves' time. And then Jaren came over to help Desmond Bane. They essentially had him double-teamed, forced him into a tough step back. It was an air ball, and the Grizzlies get a really big victory. And also, I think we have to look at the big picture of this last 11-game chunk of the schedule. We had highlighted it. They were playing 11 straight games against the West. They were only playing the competitive West teams. They weren't playing the Jazz, Trailblazers, or Pelicans. I mean, if you want to stretch it back to 12 games, you can include that Pelicans game. But 12 straight games against the West, you went 7-5 over that stretch. You finished up that stretch winning 4 out of 5. 2 wins over the Timberwolves, 2 road victories over the Spurs. All of this is very encouraging. The losses you had, many of them were close. You lost at the wire twice to the Rockets. This is a very good stretch for the Grizzlies. Even when you look at further context, Ja Morant was not available for all those games. Like the win on Friday night, Ja Morant was not there for that victory over the Spurs. So it's been a very nice stretch of basketball. And also, it was good, I think, winning this home game. A couple of things just subjectively that I really enjoyed about it. Jaren had a big national TV game. It feels like to me, and I haven't looked it up exactly because I don't know an easy way to do it. It feels like to me on national TV games, and of course those are usually going to be harder games, but it still feels like Jaren gets into foul trouble more than normal. National TV games, it seems like Jaren gets into foul trouble in a lot of those and maybe doesn't have his best performances. And so subjectively, I love the fact that he had a huge fourth quarter, that he posted a 20-10 game, that he came through over and over in the clutch when it mattered. I love that. And I also loved the national TV game on Friday night where he got to be a showcase for the rest of the squad. Santi Aldama, he had a rough game against the Timberwolves, but Santi Aldama had that career high on Friday night. You had Jalen Wells making his case for Rookie of the Year with a mammoth game on Friday night. Desmond Bane had 22 points and 14 assists on Friday night. So right now, of course, things are trending up. And also, I think the difference between the two wins was interesting because you had the Spurs game, it was all offense. The Grizzlies used their highly powered offense to post 140 points. And then contrast that with the win on Martin Luther King Day. The offense struggled, and you still found a way to win both games. Now, a few stats about those scoring numbers. First of all, the 140 points scored against the Spurs. This was the 5th time this season the Grizzlies have scored 140 or more in a game. The Grizzlies have 5 of the 20 games in the NBA this year where a team has scored 140 or more. No other team has more than 2 games scoring 140 or more. The Grizzlies, as a franchise coming into this season, only had 6 games with at least 140 points. Now they have 5 more just this season. 5 of those 6 games coming into the season where they'd scored 140 or more had occurred while Taylor Jenkins was head coach. So 10 of the 11 140-point games in Grizzlies franchise history have happened under Taylor Jenkins. Now, as far as the low-scoring win or some notable stats about winning a game against the Timberwolves where the offense struggled, this was just the Grizzlies' 3rd win of the season when they score 115 points or less. They're 3-9 this year when they score 115 or less. The Grizzlies had been 1-8 on this season when they make 10 or fewer three-pointers. They only made 7 against the Timberwolves. This was their 2nd fewest three-pointers made in a game this season. This was the 2nd fewest assists in a game this season, with the Grizzlies only getting 19. Despite all of that, you pull out a victory. I mean, this was a game that was in the mud. Maybe the only player that wasn't in the mud, and I just mean this aesthetically. I don't mean this as any kind of insult. Being in the mud is good. We wear that as a badge of honor, I feel like, as Grizzlies fans. But Desmond Bane did not struggle at any point in this game. Desmond Bane continues his incredible run of efficiency. Desmond Bane made 7 out of 14 field goal attempts against the Timberwolves. 22 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, 4 out of 6 from the three-point line. Desmond Bane's run of play over the past 20 games is just phenomenal. I mean, it's what we expected, frankly. I mean, looking at this guy and what he did last year when John Morant was out, the steps he's taken in his individual game, frankly, I feel like we expect him to score 20 points per game, get 5 assists per game while shooting around 50, 40, 90. Now, he got off to a slow start this year, had a very rough November statistically, but we're now looking at, over half of the games played this year, like the final 20, 21 games that the Grizzlies have played. He's right at 50, 40, 90 in his shooting splits. Meanwhile, he's averaging 20 points per game. So Desmond Bane definitely has it all going on. Also, Jalen Wells, I have to credit him in this game. Like I said, he frustrated the Timberwolves. He had to guard Anthony Edwards for most of the game, but his offense was big. Had 2 straight good games. He had 10 second-half points against the Timberwolves. He was one of those guys trusted with heavy minutes. Like I credited Taylor Jenkins with playing Jaren with 22 minutes in the second half. You could say the Grizzlies shortened their rotation a little bit in the second half. Now, one of the stories for this game that I haven't gotten to yet is Gigi Jackson made his season debut after playing a few Memphis Hustle games, get his cardio up. They turned to Gigi Jackson. Very notably, Taylor Jenkins said after the game, he was not planning on playing Gigi Jackson. But because things were, a little bit lifeless in the first half, I think because Jaren got in foul trouble, they turned to Gigi as the 12th man in the first half to go give them some life, give them some energy. Meanwhile, Gigi got back in the second half. Gigi made a nice driving dunk, showing exactly the kind of thing that he can provide this offense. But like Gigi played in the second half, you cut Jay Huff out of the rotation, but still 11 guys played in the second half. But I would point to the minutes as the way they shortened the rotation. In the second half against the Timberwolves, despite them playing 11 guys, most of the minutes, it was Ja and Desmond and Jaren and Jalen Wells. And then the rest of the minutes were just divided among everybody else. Like Edey only played 6.5 minutes in the second half. I think correctly you could say this was obviously the right call. Edey struggled a lot in this game. I was driving home from North Carolina. I had a vacation over the weekend, was driving home over North Carolina. I was listening to the first half of the game, first 2.5 quarters on my phone. My wife was watching the game on the phone, telling me what was happening, basically, and she does not follow the Grizzlies closely, but at one point, she was like, the really tall guy cannot touch the basketball. Why can't he get a rebound? And she said this, like there was a sequence, I went back and watched it, where he missed a rebound that came right to him. He dropped a pass that came right to him on offense, and then right after this, he missed the dunk, and she's like, what's going on with this big guy? I'm like, he's good, don't worry about it, but he did definitely struggle. I went back and watched the game. This was not a great game for Zach Edey. Maybe he was still tentative based on the injury he took to his nose that knocked him out of the Spurs game, but this was not a great Edey game. And also, we saw this in the previous Timberwolves game. When you need a stop, as good as Edey has been overall for the team's defensive numbers because of his rim protection and rebounding, when you need a stop in the fourth quarter, that's Brandon Clark's time. And Brandon Clark made some huge plays again going on the stretch. But Edey only plays 5.5 minutes in the second half. Brandon Clark, despite coming up big at the end, he only played 7 minutes in the second half. Like Luke Kennard played 8 minutes in the second half. Santi played 5. Scotty played 7. Jake, Laravia, and Gigi Jackson, they only played 5.5 minutes each. Now, one of the cool things about the bench in the second half against the Timberwolves, despite their individual minutes being, you could say, somewhat limited, in the aggregate, they came through in a big way. The bench made 7 out of 11 field goal attempts. So they were the supporting cast that you needed alongside your stars to pull out this important victory. Now, let's talk about the Spurs game, and we'll do that actually right after this short break. All right, I said I was going to talk about the Spurs game, but looking through my notes, a couple more things to hit on that Timberwolves win. The Grizzlies outscored the Timberwolves, of course, in the fourth quarter. They won for just the second time this season when trailing after 3 quarters. Both of those wins have been against the Timberwolves. In that fourth quarter, they won despite allowing a lot of offensive rebounds. Naz Reid was killing them. I mean, he was killing them in all ways, but the Timberwolves got a lot of offensive rebounds. Despite that, the Grizzlies pull out the victory. Luke Kennard in the game, he made 1 3-pointer and scored 7 points. I have no issue with that, but notably, I thought this was fun for us Grizzlies historians. Luke Kennard passed Tayshaun Prince on the all-time points leaderboard as a Grizzly. He is now 53rd in franchise history in scoring, and he's 23 points away from Damon Stoudemire, who is in 52nd. Santi Aldama in the game, he struggled, was 1 for 8, maybe one of his worst offensive games of the year. He missed all 7 of his 3-point attempts, but we forgive you, Santi, because Santi had a career high against the San Antonio Spurs on Friday night. Santi had 29 in that game. He made 5 out of 12 3-pointers. Meanwhile, Jalen Wells had 22, made 6 out of 8 3-pointers. The bench was absolutely huge. I mean, you had another great game from Desmond Bane. The 22 and 14 is just absurd. Desmond Bane 10 for 17 on his field goal attempts. But the Grizzlies finished the third quarter on a 16-0 run, and most of that run had both Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. off the court. Jake Laravia, he played the final 18 minutes of the game. He subbed out with a few seconds left in the third quarter, but played the entire fourth quarter, essentially played the final 18 minutes and 40 seconds of the game. Laravia had a big impact on this game, even without making a field goal attempt. Jake had 8 rebounds and 5 assists and 3 steals. Got to the foul line 6 times, was a plus 24 Again, despite missing all 3 of his field goal attempts. You had Brandon Clark with 12 points, making 6 out of 7 from the field. The Grizzlies outscored the Spurs in the second half 78-48. And remember, the game before, they outscored the Spurs in the second half 78-52. So that is back-to-back games against the Spurs where in the second halves you outscored them a combined 156-100. This was the Grizzlies' 9th straight win in San Antonio. The Grizzlies have won 16 of their last 17 games against the Spurs. That figure includes a play-in victory, which I always include. You could argue a play-in victory is more important than all these regular season victories. But the Grizzlies' only loss to the Spurs in their last 17 matchups was at the end of the year last year. And nobody played. Was that a big Deke Giroux game? I can't remember. I didn't look it up. But the Grizzlies have been dominating the Spurs of late, and this one was no different. Another big, I think, important or interesting thing about the win over the Spurs, so no Ja Morant in this game on Friday night. Luke Kennard got his first start of this season. Every other time Ja Morant has missed, I believe Scottie Pippen Jr. has gotten the start. There might be a Marcus Smart game in there where Scottie came off the bench. But Luke Kennard got his first start of the year. He responded in a positive way with 17 points. He was 4 for 5 on his 2-pointers, 2 for 4 on his 3-pointers, also had 4 assists and 3 rebounds. I think Luke Kennard started specifically because he's been playing so well. I mean, maybe you could cynically say it's a showcase game because they keep thinking about trading Luke, but Luke has been playing so well. I think that's why he got the start. Maybe there was some thought about maintaining the flow of the rotation and bringing Scottie off the bench. But I think specifically Luke started against the Spurs because he's been playing well. And speaking of Luke playing well, and speaking of this like rumored trade and the talks we have about the Grizzlies making a trade, I don't think the Grizzlies win all of these games if that trade where they offered Luke Kennard and John Contra for Dorian Finney-Smith went through. I mean, there is all these reports out there that the Grizzlies have hard feelings against the Nets because the Nets did not accept their offer. And also the Nets leaked their offer. Seemed like the Grizzlies thought they were going to acquire Dorian Finney-Smith. Since the Lakers acquired Dorian Finney-Smith, here are Luke Kennard's averages. He's averaging 12 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game, while shooting 51% from the field, 51% on 3-pointers. He's plus 70 in raw plus minus in these 9 games since Dorian Finney-Smith got traded. Luke's been awesome. Luke's been kind of what we hoped for. There was that run at the end of the 2023 season where, of course, Luke shot, 54%, I think, on threes as a Grizzly after the trade deadline. And he showed this vision of the Grizzlies where, hey, if you have Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard and Ja Morant, the other team can't keep up. We pointed out, all right, these net rating numbers are preposterous because no team is going to keep shooting this well. And, of course, that's true. And then last year, it was very disappointing for everyone on the entire Grizzlies, including Luke Kennard. When Luke Kennard got an opportunity, he did not step up in any meaningful way. Also, by the way, the Grizzlies have more wins this year than they had last year. Congratulations, everybody. We deserve this. But Luke Kennard has been, he's kind of a flaky player. He doesn't show up a lot. He does very little sometimes when he goes out and plays. He misses a ton of games. But right now, he's playing great. And in the last 9 games he's appeared, they're 6-3. And he's averaging 12, 5, and 4 while shooting 51%. It's been great. And I don't know if the Grizzlies are still in the trade market. Personally, I'm still interested in Cam Johnson. I remain interested in Andrew Wiggins. Part of me wonders, with the price on Jeremy Grant plummeting, that's almost a why not. If the Grizzlies 2025 lottery protected first can get you Jeremy Grant, you have to include Marcus Smart for like matching salary. Marcus and Luke for Jeremy Grant. it's interesting because, Marcus Smart never plays, guys. He's week to week. It's been a week. Maybe he'll come back for the game on Wednesday against the Hornets. By the way, Jay Huff has now played the same number of games as a Grizzly as Marcus Smart has. They've both played 38 games as a Grizzly. But I don't know about Grizzlies trades and if they're going to do anything. But right now, Luke Kennard is playing great. And full credit to him seizing the opportunity when guys are out and stepping up and forcing himself onto the court. Because you see these games where Luke does not get that many minutes. With G.G. Jackson returning and with the crunch for minutes that everyone is going to face, it's a crucible right now to figure out who's going to step up and play. And Luke has played great of late, and he's not one of those guys, I think, right now in danger of missing any minutes. But wrapping up that Spurs game, Jaren had 19 points, took him 20 shots to get there. Once again, I think he was bothered by Victor Wembanyama. Who can blame him? Scotty in that game had 7 points and 5 assists. Jay Huff had 4 points. And I think that wraps up that game. Basically wraps up the episode, I think. I do figure we should at least put some mental thought and talk about it out loud now that G.G. Jackson is back about the rotation and wondering just exactly what you're supposed to do with these players. And you're not going to play a 12-man rotation. I think like they did in the second half of this game, it makes sense, I guess, to take Jay Huff out of the rotation. I don't know if I even agree with the hot hand approach to basketball games, like seeing who plays well and then being like, okay, that's who is going to play in the second half. I completely understand the team's decision to go into the Timberwolves game on Monday not expecting G.G. Jackson to play because Jake LaRavia has been great this year. He's been great. Even when his offensive numbers don't come around, he helps you in every other way. He is a perfect cog that fits next to some of the best Grizzlies defensive lineups. If you have Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. out there, Jake at the 3 works exceptionally well with that. Santi Aldama is having an amazing season, as demonstrated by the 2 huge games he had in both road victories over the Spurs. Scottie Pippen Jr. I felt like coming into the year, when the team's fully healthy, I probably wouldn't play Scottie Pippen Jr. I'd give all my guard minutes to Marcus Smart and John Morant and Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard. And also I'd play Vince at a guard position. Well, of course, Marcus Smart hasn't been playing. We don't have to worry about that yet. But with G.G. Jackson's return, it's just getting really cramped in that rotation. And if G.G. can provide, I think, the spark of athleticism for him, much like it was in Summer League, you're going to ask him to rebound. He did rebound, remember? That was one of the more promising things I found about his play in Summer League. You want G.G. to use his size to rebound and then to score when the basketball comes to him. If he can score efficiently and defend and rebound and do those things, you're going to stick with him. Meanwhile, Jalen Wells, you're not taking away Jalen Wells' minutes. Not with the way he's shooting the basketball, not with the way he's been defending. So, you're playing John Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. I think Edie might see a minutes crunch if Gigi plays in the front court. Santi, Brandon, I know they play Brandon low minutes, but he still seems like one of your better options to close. Maybe a team can survive playing 11 deep for a while, and in that situation, I guess you would kick out Jay Huff. But when Vince returns in 2 weeks, when Marcus returns, are you going to give a DMP to Marcus Smart? I don't know the answers, and this is the biggest roster crunch, playing time crunch I've ever seen, ever, since I've covered the Grizzlies. And they've been 11 deep or so before. There were years where Grayson Allen, remember on the team in the 2020 season? Grayson Allen was a pretty solid player. Sometimes he didn't play. Kyle Anderson was getting DMPs. I was getting real mad about it at times. You had random D'Anthony Melton DMPs back in the day because you had so many guys you felt comfortable about playing. And also you have so much high-level talent. You don't want to shorten the minutes of John Morant or Desmond Bane or Jaren Jackson Jr. And so squeezing the rest of the worthy players into the rotation is really hard, but it's hard to imagine something like this, where You have Vince Williams Jr., who you want to see play, and you have Jake LaRavia excelling. I feel like the contract situation of Jake LaRavia means probably he's going to be odd man out. It's going to be one of those situations where if Jake LaRavia has a bad game, all right, he's probably not going to play the next two. It's not really fair, but it kind of is what it is. And it's going to be, I think, on the one hand, you can't make a wrong pick. Of course you can, and we'll yell about it when the Grizzlies lose. But you have, I think, you can pick 11 guys, and you should be strong enough to win on any given night, just handling the fallout when you lose. And you say, hey, why didn't Brandon Clark come back in the basketball game? Why aren't you playing G.G. Jackson? How come Jalen Wells didn't play in the fourth quarter? He was great the first 3 quarters. Why did Zach Edey only play 8 minutes? These are going to be, I think, the issues that Taylor Jenkins is going to have to face in the media. And it's going to be hard, but at the very least, the Grizzlies are finally getting healthy. And at the very least, they've won some games over the West. And it feels like right now they're on a bit of an ascendancy. And that's totally awesome. I'm super excited about it. And now the schedule relaxes a little bit. The challenge will be, will the Grizzlies not relax? Will they be able to take care of business? Like this week, you have 3 more home games. You play the Hornets on Wednesday. Then you have the Friday night home game against the Pelicans. Remember, that is a watch party in Nashville. Come down to Noble's Beer Hall at 7 p.m. to watch the game with me and other Grizzlies fans. Then you play the Jazz. So hopefully you do not trip up and you're able to maybe stack some victories here as you try to secure your spot in the West for home court advantage. Anyways, thanks everybody for listening. If you want to support my show and get exclusive bonus content, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.